So, you may have a new job, huh?
Oh, yeah, I do. Hopefully. So, this guy, he basically, I've been sending my emails out, my resume out through like Indeed and whatever, trying to find a better job. And this guy emails me, and he's just like, "Oh, okay, fill out this form real quick." And like, it's just my name and my address and my phone number. So I send that out, and he comes back to me. He's like, "Well, I've hired you." I'm like, "That was quick." So he texts me that he he wants me to no he texted me that he's going to meet me soon, that if I do a task this weekend I'll get paid. And it's $700 a week. I don't think I told you that, which is pretty good. That's like 30 grand a year. That's ridiculous amount of money right now.
It's a pretty good chunk of change.
I know, right? So he texts me. He goes, it if you make a Craigslist ad, then it's like a trial thing, right? I'm like, okay, I'll try to do it, but I have to go to work today. So because I'm a caregiver right now, and I can't really use my phone that much. So I just text him back, and I'm like, okay, I couldn't do the thing for you. I'll be off Sunday, and I'll get it done on Sunday and Monday, and hopefully we can meet up as well. So I don't know how that's going to work out, but I hope it works, because it's not just a high paying job, but it's also a professionally challenging job. Because he's basically a small business owner, and he does this all himself. I'd be handling invoices and talking with distributors and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, so there's a lot. There's a good. There's a good potential for professional development. That is, I gotta say that is something that I think a lot of people overlook when they're looking at a job or a potential career. Is a lot of people just look at the money and they don't think, okay, what skills am I going to be able to hone while
Exactly, because right now what I work at as a caregiver, I make about 140 every weekday and every 160 every weekend. That's higher than what I could make doing any other job right now, but that doesn't go anywhere. You don't get higher than that. You might be able to make $200 a day somewhere else, but there's a cap on that. You'll never make more than 25 to 30 grand a year.
Yeah, because anything beyond that, you have to go to school, have some sort of like medical training.
No, even that in this field, even that, no, nothing. That's
really?
as high as I have a friend who has CNA, RNA stuff. He only gets paid $250 a week, or $250 a day. I'm sorry.
Oh, geez, that's a I'm sorry, but if you're a registered nurse, that's a waste of it.
Yeah. So anyway, we got some stuff to talk about, don't we?
We do, and I don't know about you, but I'm not only feeling 22, but I'm also very excited. So that was a Taylor Swift call out.
I don't think she needs a call out.
Everyone who didn't catch it. But no, I'm actually. It's been a really interesting week. I typically when I'm at work, I'll have something on that I'm listening to while I'm doing my work, and being able to have C-SPAN on during this week has been very entertaining.
Right. It's probably the last bit of real entertainment in like political discourse we're gonna have for a while, and it's just gonna be like news stations talking about what Trump is doing. But
yeah, we got the inauguration coming up.
That's gonna be the last thing. That's about like the very end of the election. It's gonna be we're at the dusk of the election, I would say.
Oh yeah, definitely getting in the twilight. Oh, so they're having like a welcome party for Trump in D.C. On today, January 19th, 2017, and Three Doors Down was playing at it, like in front of the Jefferson Memorial. It was pretty crazy.
I mean, if I was Three Doors Down, I'd take whatever I could get because they're kind of irrelevant now.
Well, yeah, but. Hey, Superman, Kryptonite is still a rocket song.
It is, but when you listen to it 100 times on Pandora, when you're trying to listen to grunge music, it just doesn't, like, that's not really that grungy, that's more like pop rock.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so much went on this week.
So I think
Very
today
much.
we can talk about some cabinet picks, and at the end of the episode, we're gonna really get into something that's very important, but we'll leave that for later. So let's go ahead and get started. We talked about this earlier. We're gonna talk about Scott Pruitt and Rick Perry. We decided to bunch these guys together because they basically have the same kind of viewpoint. So both of them were avid climate change deniers, and in my book, deal breaker, automatic deal breaker. You know, climate change, real, caused by humans, need to fix it. But they flipped somewhat, about half flipped. They said it's real, but it's not caused. It's marginally caused by humans, which is also a big no-no, because it is absolutely caused by humans. As soon as we started pumping oil out of the ground, that's when the climate started skyrocketing. But I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, it's weird. So, I don't understand this stance that they take. You know, so you say, okay, I don't believe in climate. You know, I don't believe in climate change. Okay, a couple of years go by, I can believe, because I'm the kind of person that if you present me enough evidence, my stances on things will change. So, you know, for me, it's sitting here and looking at at Pruitt and Perry, which great name for a '70s band. You know, seeing them kind of like pivot their stance, I get it. You know, like they might not be necessarily 100% on board, but you know they have to kind of say it. You know, that play that little political game. But kind of what I don't understand is the stance they take that okay, the climate change is occurring, but we don't know the extent that humans have on it. Well, that's not even the stance that you need to take. Like, I mean, if you really want to dodge that, why not just say, look, climate change is happening, and it is man-made, you know, but we can't completely shift everything in our society away from fossil fuels. And to me, this is just the logical stance to take, to say, hey, look, you know, it would be great to not have to worry about oil and to not be dependent on petroleum products, but we're not at a point technologically that we can do that. You know, we don't have, you know, our infrastructure set up to operate around hydrogen fuel cell cars. We don't have the manufacturing set up to make these vehicles. And even if we did, let's say, you know, tomorrow they said, you know what, look, climate change is the biggest thing. This is what we're focusing on going forward. And they just passed sweeping legislation that said that, you know, all fossil fuel based cars are now illegal. Okay, you would also have to pass a law that says eating meat is illegal. You would have to have limits on the amount of beef that people can eat. There's so many things that you would have to do if we said tomorrow we're completely shifting our entire system around fighting climate change that just is not feasible. You know, like even if you did that, you would have to give everyone a free replacement car for their fossil fuel cars, and then you would still have big semi-trucks and 18-wheelers and airplanes and boats out there, because that's how we ship things all across this country and from nation to nation. And then, you know, people aren't going to want to give up eating their hamburgers, so that's not going to happen. You know, so climate change is a big issue, but the way that it's being approached in the legislative process is just fear-mongering, and it's not based in reality. You know, you have the Republicans on one side who are, you know, too afraid of losing face for the fact that they've basically said that climate change is a Democratic hoax to discredit and to harm businesses for the past 8 years, placed up against the plain fact that there's scientific evidence to back it up. And then you have on the other side the Democrats who can't back off of their stance that if we don't pass their legislation that they want to pass, which is basically just shifting subsidies from the oil industry to industries that they like, you know, that we're all going to die. They're both so stuck on this like fear mongering platform that neither of them can back down, and that's why we're all going to burn. Because because the people that are in charge of the legislation have, are just incapable or unwilling to approach the subject in an intelligent manner.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with you on that, but we're obviously not doing enough. There's no way we're doing it. We keep trying to figure out new ways to pump all of the oil out of the ground. We need to start transitioning now, and it doesn't really look like that's happening. We need to...
Yeah. Well, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say we should have started transitioning in the 80s.
Well, that was...
Because we're talking about a 30 to 50 year transition period. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight.
Well, to be fair, this is going to be a little crazy, but to be fair, there wasn't really conclusive evidence back then, and not enough evidence like we have now to really convince people, and people didn't really care about it because, like, no one was really looking at climate science at that time in the way that we do now. But I do believe that we should be really transitioning. I gotta. When I do the TISC, and I got to take a quote from Bernie Sanders, we have to view this as much of a national security threat than as the Nazis were to us in World War II. Because in the next 50 years, after about, I would say about 20 years, after about 20 years, wars will no longer be fought over water. Wars will no longer be fought over oil; they will be fought over water. Because we will start using up all of our reserves. We already waste way too much water. That in itself is bad enough. All of our coastal cities are going to be underwater. New York City, Miami, place where I came from, Myrtle Beach, that's going to be underwater. LA, San Francisco, you name it. Just keep, like, over half of our population lives somewhere within, I think, 10 miles of a coast. Now, you're talking about displacing half of the world's population. That's ridiculous. In the next 100 years.
You bring up a really good point in that too, and when the oil runs out, the world's gonna go into mayhem, because everything we do is based around the use of fossil fuels. So we all know that we use oil for gasoline to power our cars. That's the most obvious use of fossil fuels. And also oil to lubricate the machinery for those vehicles. We also burn fossil fuels to, power our homes, which has led to our technological rise that we've been able to enjoy here. But there's a lot of other things that oil's in that people don't think about. Medicine, IV bags,
plastic, all plastics, all plastics.
Yeah, all made from petroleum, all made from fossil fuel, all made from oil. Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, when you think about how frightening that is, that we could get to a point where we can't make the basic things that we take for granted on a daily basis. Like Europe they got hit with the Black Plague, but we could be facing something much worse on a global scale. And just to touch on your point, that the amount of drinkable water, because this is the part that I think blows a lot of people's minds. I know it blew my mind when I learned it, that, there's so much water on the planet. There's more water, water covers more surface area on this planet than land does. But the amount of drinkable, potable water on this planet is so minuscule, and we waste it in such massive amounts. It is ridiculous.
And not to mention that fracking poisons the underground aquifers. So not only are we using up all of our drinking water, but we're using fracking to poison the only other water source we have.
You seen the video of the in North Dakota where they turn the faucet on and the water comes out? It's just like this.
I've seen
sludge.
Where they can light their water on fire.
Yeah, I mean, it's flammable water. Who would have thought? And you can't drink that. You can't bathe in it. So what do you do? I mean, it's just.
And we'll end this climate change discussion on this one point, that it really will, I think, will drive the point home. There is, I think you might be familiar with this. There is and I think there's a guy named Enrico Fermi, I think his name is. He developed the Fermi paradox, which means civilizations have. He thinks civilizations have great barriers. So Great Barrier number 1, becoming intelligent. Great Barrier number 2, not dying out from disease. Great Barrier number 3, it's a thought experiment. Our Great Barrier, I don't think our Great Barrier is nuclear war. I think that cooler heads will prevail over that, and humans are smart enough to think, okay, we're not going to destroy ourselves over it. What I think might happen is we run out of oil and we haven't transitioned enough into renewable energy. That will be the end of our society.
Well, I mean, we look at war and weapons, and it's such a clear and present danger that it's hard for the human mind to go full into, like total annihilation. But the problem with climate change and with our resource scarcity now is that it's not something that people see every day in this country. You travel outside of America, there are places where there is no clean water. But here in America, you go to pretty much anywhere and you can turn a faucet and you get clean water. And it's to a point where we take it so much for granted that we can't possibly imagine the idea that the day will ever come where there is not food. Not that you can't afford food, but that there is not food. Or that you can't afford water, but there is not water. It just is not there.
It will be clean drinking water will be
massively
a luxury. That's gonna be scary, and that's the world my children will live in, which really scares me. And the world my grandchildren will live in.
I was watching this Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was doing this talk about. He was talking about climate change and how we solve the problem. And he basically said, look, this is the hardest problem that we as a species have ever come up against. Because it's something that can't be, easily encapsulated. It can't be attacked. It can't be killed. It's something that has to be changed now, but we won't see the benefits of it until years down the line. And it's so hard for the human brain to do that. I mean, you talk to someone about, planning for retirement. Put a little bit of money away, and you'll see that money when you're 50, 60 years old. It's so hard to get people to do that, to think abstractly about the future, and when the now is, typically what we as a species, what we live in. Evolutionarily, we react to things that are happening now and in a very small area. So it's difficult for us to say, okay, we need to think about something that's going to affect us 50 years in the future and on a massive scale.
Yeah, and that's going to be a really big test for our civilization. And toward the end of my life, I might be seeing, like, just some of the worst problems that our humanities ever faced unless we start fixing it. But well, let's continue. We could. I think we'll definitely do an episode on climate change later on. We'll probably do either one of the one-off episodes we did, or we're gonna do a really extended version on the podcast.
Look out for the 5-hour.
The 5-hour climate change episode. But okay, so let's talk about the next cabinet pick. The one that's really fresh in my mind right now is DeVoy. Is that her name? DeVos, yeah. Betsy DeVos. That's right.
Yeah.
So, my boy interviewed Betsy DeVos. I keep thinking it's Betsy Ross. That's
no. Different person. Dead.
The dead person is going to be our education director. No, anyway. My boy interviewed Betsy DeVos and brought the sledgehammer to her freaking head. And did you see that interview between Sanders and Betsy DeVos?
I was fortunate enough to have her confirmation hearing on in my ear on C-SPAN while I was working, so I was kind of listening to it. Now this specific thing that I think you're going to bring up, I missed.
Okay.
I think I might have been on the call.
I'll fill you in. It's because it's pretty cool. It's like when you fight Republicans on things that actually hurt them, instead of he said a bad word. He said a bad word. No, that's not how you beat Republicans. But what she said, what Bernie Sanders was, if like, how much money have you donated to the Republican Party? And she's like, I'm not at liberty to answer that question. No, he's like, no. That's like free information that you can get that anywhere. And he basically, okay, well, if you won't tell me, I'll tell you. You donated $200 million over the course of your life to the Republican Party, and $2.7 million just this election cycle, right? He's like, and then he said, if you were not a billionaire and you did not donate that money, and he also said that she has absolutely no experience in public education. She might have experience in private education and maybe having her kids in private education, but because the Department of Education is public schools, not private schools, not charter schools, public schools. Now, he said, if you were not a billionaire and you did not give this money to the Republican Party, do you think you would have the opportunity to be in this position? That it doesn't matter how she answered the question, because of course she didn't even use logic. So of course, because I've worked with families and did things, and her argument wasn't even conclusive or even satisfactory. That argument alone really hit the hammer. And when anybody hears that, they're gonna be like, "Oh, I know why. I know why she got that position. Of course we know why, because she gave the money, right?" And so I'm going to go to the second thing that Sanders said. Sanders said, because he had a big campaign promise, which I was completely for, free public education, free public universities, right? Like what do you call them? Free public college, not universities, Harvard, Yale. No, those won't be free. Talking about
like community colleges and I got you.
Yeah, community college. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Free community college, bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctorate. And he said, "Will you work with me to make college tuition, public community colleges tuition free?" And she basically said, "That's a cute idea, but who's going to pay for it?"
That's a legitimate question.
And he basically laid it out how he's going to pay. It's an $80 billion program, right? I think it's over the course of 10 years. $80 billion program. That's like that's like 1% of our budget. And that's to invest in our education future, to allow people to get the education that is now almost mandatory.
Here's where I'm going to disagree, because I don't think that we are at a place in our society where it's mandatory to have a bachelor's degree. I think our generation specifically has been sold a bill of goods on college, and we've turned around and kind of sold it to the next generation. I hope we do have any younger listeners, I hope they wise up and they realize that college isn't the only way to success in this country, because there's another crisis that we're facing in this country that not a lot of people know about, but it is it's staring us right in the face, and it's only going to get worse as things go forward. But I guess to your first point, I don't see why it's an issue how much she contributed to the Republican Party. She has experience dealing with private schools and charter schools, and her stance moving forward, and I think what a big part of the educational strategy going forward is going to be is getting school choice in the hands of the parents and making charter schools and private schools more of an option for more of the population. So I think her experience with that is invaluable for the specific platform that we're looking at. And as far as free, the free public, for your community colleges, for associates, bachelor's degrees, I think it is antithetical to what we really want to do. Because I'm gonna kind of lay this idea out here, and it's gonna sound weird when I first say it, but think about it for a moment. Because my thinking is the real issue with education is that it no longer, because it's public. You go to elementary through high school, and you're guaranteed some sort of basic education in this country. But because you're guaranteed it, it is literally taken as granted, and so there's no value to it. I mean, you kind of understand on a basic level that you should know how to read, how to write, and how to do math. But there are large swaths of our population, typically in your inner cities, in your rural areas, where having that, more traditional education isn't necessarily something that they see as a value every day. So my solution, and it's probably going to be one of those controversial things, is I don't think education should be free. I think there should be, some sort of a gateway to get that education out. It doesn't necessarily have to be a monetary gateway. It doesn't have to say, okay, well, if you want to go to elementary school, you have to pay your way through elementary school, because that would be ridiculous. But, there should definitely be some sort of, there should be like a test or something, because they do this in Japan too, where, they have...
And also in Germany.
Yeah.
I think you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, in Japan, they're a little bit more hardcore about it. Like, if you want to get into, like, higher education, you have to consistently pass harder and harder tests. So, like, to even be able to go to university, or even be able to go to college, you have to pass tests to even qualify for that. So while that may be a little bit harsh, and I think we touched on about the idea of any opportunity available to anyone in this country, but I think if we put that kind of out there, like say, hey, you can't just walk into a community college, put your name on a list, and start learning about ancient Roman liberalism or something like that. If we put a value onto the education, then the people who are getting that education will say, well, I don't want to waste this. This isn't something that I can just, pick up and throw away. Because you're seeing that on a lot of university campuses where, because, hey, university is a business. Let's go ahead and lay that out there right now.
But
Harvard,
public community colleges are funded by the government.
Right. No, I'm talking about like your higher education, like your Harvard.
Yeah, I understand. That's the point of the legislation is that Harvard and Yale and Chicago University and University of Minneapolis or University of Minnesota,
yeah.
those you have to actually pay for.
Right.
When it comes to like trade schools, like you talked about, and like DeVry, I think you actually think DeVry is a for profit, but you know what I mean. Like those city colleges that are part of public education that get public education subsidies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like your trade schools, though, you can kind of get paid to go to a trade school. I mean, you can get an apprenticeship, like a trade apprenticeship, and you're working. You're not making a lot of money. You're probably going to be making like $9 to $10 an hour, but you're making more money while you're learning something, and you're going to make as much, once you're done with your apprenticeship, as someone who goes to school for 4 years to get an English degree. Actually, you're probably going to be making more because there's not much demand for English majors these days. But I guess my point is, kids, then they go to college and they're told, hey, find yourself here. Meanwhile, their parents are getting a bill for $150,000 a semester. That's insane.
Now, I have a different view of your argument in a way that I don't think that incentivizing excellence, in a sense. I think that's really what you're talking about. Is you have to meet requirements and you have to prove that you're good enough for college. That's different from I think what the actual problem is how much it actually costs, which has
skyrocketed.
went up tenfold.
Yeah. Well, they're saying the student loan student loan is the next big bubble. You know,
It is,
and
yeah.
we saw what happened when the housing bubble popped and when the student loan bubble pops. Because let's face it, people have all this debt. There's all this debt out there, and people aren't getting jobs that allow them to pay that debt down. Eventually, it's gonna crash in on itself, and it'll be worse than the housing crash.
Yeah, and if you and you can knock out a huge chunk of that future debt, and also under that provision under free public education, it would also lower the debt burden for people who have already gotten that education. But if that, it would help lessen a huge future financial crisis. It's something $1 trillion of debt that people hold because of student debt. And that, I think, is the real core problem of the education. And I don't think that DeVos is actually going to address that. He blatantly said it. Who's going to pay for it? The government should pay for it because the government is supposed to protect the economy.
Yeah, but I mean, you gotta. I think the question though is where is that money going to come from?
Well, when Bernie Sanders
if
ran, and when he talked about this subject, he said he would put a tax on Wall Street speculation. Now, I understand this. I'm a little bit of a financial junkie too. I've dabbled in the stock market, and I'm really getting back into it now. But let me tell you about something, how these banks can suck money right out of the stock market. They have what's called exchange traded funds and high frequency trading. What they do is they trade hundreds of millions of dollars every second, with a single program. And it continuously sucks money out of these securities and out of these things. And it's really hard to explain right now. Maybe I'll probably go into it further in one of the one-off episodes. But it essentially sucks money directly from these companies. And what it does is it hurts people who don't really, like I said, it's hard to explain. But what it does is it sucks money out of these companies, and they just profit massively off of it. And it makes the stock market much more volatile, right? So what would happen is you put a tax on, like, each trade gets a 1% tax or something, like, not a 1% tax, maybe like a 0.5% tax. That in itself would pay for this education initiative threefold, right? You could take the rest of that revenue and move it somewhere else. And it would stabilize the stock market. It would stop 5% drops in a day. Some of those we saw in the Great Recession, right? It would have been a much slower decline and been a lot more manageable. So, and also reinstating Glass-Steagall could have also helped with that. But that's how he would pay for it. Now, it's a win-win scenario. So it's not companies like GM or like Apple that are doing these things. It is these investment banks that created these programs to directly suck money out of companies and stocks using exchange traded funds and using these programs. Exchange traded funds also do this too. And it makes the economy and the stock market much more risky. Because back in the day, the stock market was like, you threw that money in there and you bought and hold forever. Now you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to watch your stocks every day, right? I have a couple stocks now that I've been looking at, and it's been a 3% fluctuation in a week. I was up 6%, now I'm up 3%, and I was up 6%, then I was down up 2%, in a matter of a week. And
jeez.
It's crazy. Back in the day when you would be lucky if you got a 0.25% increase in a single day.
Yeah, but also back in the day, we allowed companies to, build themselves up to their highest possible point. Just even back in the 90s, there was an antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft because Windows was popular.
Yeah.
Like, Apple was a thing, Linux was a thing. There were other operating systems out there, but because our legislators don't understand how computers work, they made Microsoft break themselves up, which is stupid. But I digress. I mean, I get what you're saying though. I mean, if the money is there, and it's just an issue of how do we get to it, I think, obviously it would help lessen the burden on some people. But I still maintain my point that by making the, by not requiring some sort of investment from the person who's getting that education, that it's something that they won't fully invest themselves in. I mean, personally, the first time I went through college, I wasn't really completely invested, and my grades showed. But the second time I went through, I was paying for it, and I was like, okay, I'm on the hook for this, so I better get everything out of it that I can, and my grades improved. I got a lot more out of it.
As a final point on my end, there are a lot of people that study really hard. I don't think I've ever met anybody who hasn't studied every single day for their college. I don't think I've ever met anybody, like 20-year-old kids that study as hard as they can every single, like, I got this midterm next week and I got to study for it so hard. They take off of work because they have to study all night for a midterm. So, I mean, it's in my opinion, what your viewpoint is a little misguided about how you think how they're entitled and they think they deserve the college. I mean, I was watching Animal House the other day, right? You've seen Animal House, right? National Lampoon Animal House.
Yeah,
and
a couple times.
Those kids, I'm like, is this 1950 or is this supposed to be what people think the 2010s look like? Because it's a mirror image. If you watch Neighbors and you watch Animal House, it's the same movie. It's literally the same movie.
Well, that is the misconception about college life that I think a lot of people go into. Yeah. But I mean, I just mean generally speaking, like not even about college. I mean about any level of education. The person who is benefiting from that education, even if it's just learning how to add, we need to be instilling this into our children that, hey, look, these are necessary things, even if it's like, okay, well, I don't want to go to college, so I don't really need to take AP history. Fine, but you still need to know basic algebra to break the tip when you go out to eat. Mm-hmm. And I will never forget the first time that I went out to eat with someone, and the check came, and I calculated the tip in my head, and they looked at me like I had just done some sort of magic trick, and they're like, how'd you do that? I was like, you move the decimal point over one, and then you add a little bit onto it, and they're like, really? And I was like, yeah, it's really not that hard. I mean, percents boggle, escape people sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. You just basically take a number off. If you quick life hack, if you want a tip, just take a number off. Anyway, but we have some more picks to talk about. One more pick in my mind. Nuchin. I can't remember what is his first name. This is a lot of names that I have to remember.
I like to call him Munchkin.
I know that's exactly what I thought when I first. Munchkin? Is that really his name? Oh, Nuchin. Okay, because the M is silent. He must be French.
No. Well, okay, so no, they were pronouncing it Mnuchin all day on C-SPAN. Yeah, so I don't. It might be Nuchin or Mnuchin, but either way,
it might be Mnuchin. That might be.
Maybe. Can I PSA? Can I PSA here for a second, dude? Bro, this is a bro moment.
Bro.
Dude, get it easier. Like change it to like Smith or something, just for me. I would take it as a personal, favorite.
Just change your last name to Chin.
Yeah, well, because he'll probably. I mean, all these people are probably gonna get confirmed, and so for the next 4 years at least, we're gonna be referring to Mnuchin. Would be like going out of my mind.
Or if it's Mnuchin, he could just add an A between A and N.
I know, right?
Like, come on.
But, all right.
We've had our comedic relief, so. I have actually mixed feelings about Mr. Chin.
I don't think you have mixed feelings. I think you have pretty well fleshed out feelings about Mr.
Okay, I have 95% solid feelings and another 5% mixed feelings. So, this is a guy that there's I can't remember the senator who interviewed him here, but it was a Democrat from Ohio. I know that. He basically said you foreclosed on veterans, which is a violation of a law, right? And he admitted to it, right? He admitted to it. He's like, "Oh, I wish we couldn't have done that." Well, you had the option not to, and you did it anyway because you wanted profits. And he ran One West, which was I think it was a mortgage company, and where I do not want someone in our government who attributed to the housing crisis. Period. That's my viewpoint on it. And people like him destroyed our economy with greed. Let's call it what it is. It's greed. And you might have a different viewpoint on greed, but I have a viewpoint of greed can only work if it is regulated in a certain manner. If unfettered greed can destroy an economy. And what happened in the housing crisis was unfettered greed. It ran wild. And I know it was, and I told you this earlier in the prep, where I believe half of it was government negligence, and the other half of it was fraudulent activity from banks. And there have been countless bankers who have paid fines and have been caught with performing fraud. And I do not want someone like that in our government. So, what do you think?
Well, kind of to tackle your points, my first thing I would say is, if we're saying we don't want any, if we were to clean out all of our levels of our government of people who benefited in some way from the housing crisis that hit this country, we wouldn't have a government, because we would have to reselect we would have to redo the entire legislative, judicial, and probably a good amount of the executive branch going forward.
Which
here.
I am totally in favor of. I would love to do that.
Okay, well, unfortunately...
I mean, one really decisive election could do it.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, for every incumbent to lose and to get completely new people, it's the logistics of that are messy, but, with this, and just kind of tackling this one issue with Mnuchin, he was in charge of, or he owned a good chunk of a company that benefited from a really bad situation. But when I look back on it, I look at it this way: is with companies, businesses are very easy to figure out. They're very easy to predict. And I think as human beings, we like predictable things. Any company, banks, any corporation, they're always going to do things that is going to maximize their profit and put them in the best position for future profits. So when, everything happened during the housing crisis, these banks, these mortgage holders, these investors, they had to figure out a way to, kind of spin this around and get out of it, taking the least amount of hit. So I don't really, I don't really think that they should be held their feet to the fire for, doing what they had to do to ensure that they and their stockholders and their investors would be able to see the other side of that crisis. I mean, morally speaking, they probably did some things they shouldn't have done. Legally speaking, they probably did some things that they shouldn't have done. But it's one of those things, like when you're in the middle of a crisis, you really you don't have that many options. You do what you have to do in that situation to make sure that you see the other side of it. So nobody's really clean when it comes to that. Everybody's got a little bit of dirt. I mean, I would even go so far as to say, your local real estate agents, probably even did some shady stuff during the housing crisis. So I don't think that it should be one of those things that we're going to say, okay, you made a profit during this during this critical time. You kind of had to make things work when things weren't working, and now we're going to punish you forever for it. What happened during that housing and that banking crisis had happened, and while it's important to understand on a historical context what caused that, all the factors that caused that, so we don't repeat it going forward, I don't think that's a reason to necessarily say, okay, well, now you're forbidden from doing anything in the public sector going forward, and we're going to treat you like a pariah forever because of it.
Well, I mean, well, that's what we do. We have differing viewpoints, but I want to touch on the 5% that I didn't mention. The 5%. I was reading a Yahoo Finance article about Mnuchin's confirmation hearing. At the very end of the article, it said, if anyone knew what the loopholes were for big corporations, this guy would know. And this is where I have mixed feelings. Because if he knows what they are, will he either help his friends in the billionaire banking world exploit those loopholes and make them wider, or will he change heart and close the loopholes? I really don't think he will close those loopholes. I don't believe you go from exploiting it and then finding political Jesus and reversing what you've been doing and closing those loopholes. I don't think that's going to happen.
I agree. Yeah. Well, I mean, anyone who's been paying attention to the people that have been picked for these positions, the stance, Donald Trump's stance going into this has been very anti-regulation. So I think we're realistically going to see, and from a historical perspective, look at what Reagan did in the 80s. It's very similar. He has a lot of people in charge of these agencies, and the people in charge of the agencies aren't real big fans of the agencies that they're in charge of. So we're probably going to see more relaxing of regulations going forward. In fact, if I were a betting man and I had money to bet, I would bet that that's what we're going to see happen. You're going to see a lot of regulations reversed.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. Yeah, but in my viewpoint, if you expand growth that much, that quickly, you create a bubble, almost every time. And if you look at a history of the Dow Jones, if you just look at Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, at the end of every Republican president's term, the end of every Republican president's term, there's been a huge sell-off in most of the times recessions. That's data you can view yourself, and if people at home can view themselves too. Just on the stock market. And usually the stock market crashes, then the U.S. economy crashes. It's just pretty tied together because that's the 30 and 500 and 2,000 biggest companies.
Now,
most of the jobs.
Here's my question. I know we got to move on, but I just want to get this in there. Those sell-offs, do you think that those sell-offs are more speculative, basically saying, okay, we have a Republican president going out, a Democratic president coming in, so they expect more regulations, so they want to sell off that to get as much value as they can before the regulations come in, and they kind of have to tighten their belts a bit?
I think it's because the thing is, if you've looked at Democratic presidents, stocks always have gone up. In President Obama's term, we went from 8,000 Dow Jones to almost 20,000 Dow Jones, right? So, and also with Clinton's presidency, that was from the 90s to 2000, one of the greatest economic expansions in our nation's history. We had actually a surplus for once in our deficit, and we had like a $5 trillion surplus, I think.
Well, that surplus is where that surplus came from is up to is not necessarily.
But anyway, so we've basically given our viewpoints on Mnuchin's policies, and I want to talk more about the economics thing, but
for another time. Yeah,
we have a really big issue right now, and it is scary on the level of World War III, and it's sad that I have to say this. Like Leia in Star Wars, Donald Trump, you're our only hope. It kills me to say this.
No, there is another. We do have another hope because
Bernie Sanders.
Because General Mattis, former General Mattis, he just got confirmed as Secretary of Defense. So even if Donald Trump, what you're getting ready, even if Donald Trump goes off the deep end on this, I think he'll be reined in by the voice of sanity. But continue.
Okay, we've been beating around the bush on it. So President Obama, as he's leaving office, has sent thousands of troops to bordering Russian countries: Estonia, Norway, Romania, so on and so forth.
What did they border?
Like they're literally within 100 to 200 miles of Russia. Thousands of troops, thousands, not hundreds, thousands of U.S. military troops. I've seen pictures of U.S. military troops in snow in Norway.
Yeah, no, this is a legitimate.
This is and literally Russia literally borders Norway.
This is a legitimately scary thing. I mean, it doesn't take much, and we don't want to kick off a war with Russia. I'm just going to go ahead.
This is something that scares me and it infuriates me with Democrats. This is why I do not consider myself a Democrat. Because, and let me actually give you an example of how smug Democrats are and how partisan Democrats are right now. Instead of focusing on our national security interests and not initiating a nuclear war, Rachel Maddow from MSNBC basically said, I'm just going to paraphrase it, if Donald Trump takes those troops out of those countries, Russia must have dirt on him. That's what she said. So you would rather escalate closer to a world war than Donald Trump doing the right thing and not escalating war with Russia. I'm not saying that Russia is a good, like Vladimir Putin. I'm not saying Vladimir Putin is good, but this is off the deep end, man.
It's a pretty radical move. And then to say, well, if you step back from that cliff, then it's because someone's blackmailing you to do it. That's an insane narrative to put forth. And I'm kind of glad that Donald Trump is who Donald Trump is, because I don't think he's proven he's not the kind of person that's going to be bullied or blackmailed by media coverage. So if he wants to pull those troops out, he'll pull those troops out. The thing that scares me is if he looks
these kind of arguments do not affect him. These kind of arguments do not affect him whatsoever. These are, excuse me for saying this, these are bullshit arguments. And Democrats are using them, and that is not how you defeat Trump. You defeat Trump by telling him what he's already said. Like Bernie Sanders did when he told him, are you going to cut Medicare and Medicaid? You promised you weren't going to. Are you going to keep that promise? That's how you fight Trump, not by putting him in a blackmail position and expecting him, if I do it, then they're not going to elect. Donald Trump is not Obama. Obama would do that. If George Bush put those troops on the border and Obama came in, he would have been, okay, I'll just leave them there. I'll just leave them because I want Republicans to like me. I always healed Republicans. So it is so infuriating that they will not admit that their candidate was the worst Democratic candidate ever. Then they will not admit that, but they will keep blaming Russia until they are kicked out of office. Now, let me, and that exact point, let me make a little example. I worked in retail, and when I saw a thief, right, when I saw a shoplifter, every time we caught them, they got infuriatingly mad. They didn't get mad because, like, you're like, they only got mad because they got caught. And they're mad at themselves. And they want to blame something else. They never want to blame themselves for getting caught. They want to blame you for getting caught. So what they're doing is they're blaming Russia for getting caught. Even though Julian Assange has said Russia was not the source of the WikiLeaks emails from the DNC. No evidence. Even Donald Trump himself has said this national security, this Russian report is complete crap. So, what are your thoughts on this? I am infuriated.
I'm completely with you. I mean, it's one thing to kind of play the game of politics, which I think we've all come to understand. You know, you have your two parties, and they kind of play against each other, and they take certain sides, and blah blah. We're used to that, but I mean, to risk a military engagement by parking troops right on the borders of another superpower. And let's make no mistake, if Russia decided to say, you're going to park your troops there, okay, well, we're going to take this as an act of aggression. It wouldn't just be Russia coming against us. We would be seen as the aggressors on the world stage. So,
oh yeah, of course,
the UN and NATO would not be with us.
Here's an example. What if Russia put troops in Mexico?
Exactly. Or like if tomorrow 2,000 or 20,000 Russian troops showed up on the borders of Canada and Mexico, what would be the reaction?
It's like, oh, it's offensive. They're coming for us. It's offensive.
How dare they?
But they're actually, the Democrats are actually, Obama is claiming that this is defensive. He's actually claiming this is a defensive measure.
I think that's a hard sell.
The Cuban Missile Crisis was exactly this, but the Russians wanted to put missiles in Cuba. And JFK wouldn't allow it. He saw it as an act of aggression. This is the same exact thing. Thankfully, Obama will be leaving. Hopefully, Donald Trump will keep his goody relationship with Russia and be, okay, I'm going to pull him out because we're partners or whatever. I don't know what his relationship with Russia is.
Well, I think he definitely wants to open up positive trade with Russia. Now, my main concern, though, with the thing that when I think about the situation that makes me afraid is what if Trump doesn't pull the troops back? Because it is very Donald Trumpy to allow for a more aggressive stance during negotiations. So, what if his plan is? What if he decides? Okay, his plan is, I'm going to leave those troops there, and then go into trade negotiations with Russia to relieve some of those sanctions, and then the whole time he's just kind of like looking over his shoulders, like, sure would be crazy if those troops move forward a little bit. I don't know. I don't know because there's so.
If Donald Trump escalates. If Donald Trump escalates this war any farther than what it has, he should be impeached. Period.
If he escalates the situation, he has lost. Me personally, this that'll be like my button. If he escalates it, if he escalates this issue with Russia, he will have lost any support, any backing, any positive goodwill that I had, and any hope that I had for his presidency. That's a bridge too far for me. Even if everything else was great, but we get into a war with Russia, I'm sorry, I can't. That's just a bad move. You don't start a war with Russia. You don't start a war with China. You don't.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very important piece of information for every one of our listeners to understand that it's an actual crisis, and for Republicans and the people who voted for Donald Trump, you better be starting holding them accountable because this is a moment where Donald Trump can really shine. in my opinion.
Yeah.
If he does actually de-escalate, then I'll be a little bit more okay with his presidency. Not like I'm like 99% not okay with it, but 98% not okay with it if he escalates with Russia. I might even be 90% not okay with it. Anyway, yeah, we've talked about all the cabinet picks and the possible incoming of World War III.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about it.
So we do have a episode. We have a couple episodes coming out in back-to-back days. So we're gonna have the inauguration episode coming out tomorrow. I will definitely be watching tomorrow. This is probably coming out on Friday, so I'll be watching it today. If you're watching it on Friday,
On January 20th, 2017.
January 20th, yeah, January 20th, I will be watching, and I will be watching the whole thing, the whole speech, everything, because political junkie and whatnot. So we have opened a new Twitter account for the podcast. So you can actually follow us on Twitter at symbol balance point. No, sorry, at symbol balance _point. That's our Twitter handle. You can look us up there. Our Facebook, facebook.com/balancepointradio. You can email us at balancepointradio@gmail.com, and SoundCloud, of course, soundcloud.com/balancepointradio.
You can leave messages in the podcast too. It's amazing what we can do with technology these days.
Yeah, if you email us, we will definitely answer your questions. Feel free to email us. Feel free to comment on our videos. Also, we have a YouTube page, youtube.com/balancepointradio as well. My episode, if you haven't seen it, on Is Our Government Corrupt, has slides on it. So if you listen to it on SoundCloud, check it out on YouTube. I have the evidence on the screen. You can also listen to all of our podcasts except episode 1, because episode 1 didn't have the best audio. I decided to keep it on SoundCloud, but definitely listen to that on SoundCloud. But the rest of our episodes will be uploaded on YouTube and SoundCloud. So
like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to find out when to get your notifications. Because apparently for YouTube, when you subscribe to a channel, YouTube thinks you don't want to always see when this channel puts out new content. So you have to ring the bell to get those notifications.
I'm looking at my subscriber page, and I'm like, where are all the cool people that I subscribe to? And look at that, the bell's not rung. And I've missed like three videos that I wanted to watch.
No, fun fact, if you don't ring the bell for the channel too, YouTube might actually unsubscribe you from the channel.
That's ridiculous. Yeah. That's ridiculous. I have like 100 subscriptions because YouTube is my TV.
Yeah, I think it's for a lot of people these days. I mean, what even is TV anymore? I don't know. Netflix, Hulu, YouTube.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, everyone, thanks for watching. Or listening, I should say. Well, if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching.
All right, y'all have a good night. We'll see you for the inauguration.
Yep. See you tomorrow.